Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Time Heist, written by Stephen Moffat and Steve Thompson, and is directed by Douglas McEdam. And as you can see, I'm actually on location. I'm actually recording the start of this video in Cardiff, which is actually where they filmed many Doctor Who episodes, most noticeably Boomtown, bits of Rose, the majority of Torchwood. But for this video, the main reason for this is that this is where they also filmed Time Heist, specifically the opening shot where they're outside, and it's noticeable from these pillars, which you can also spot in Boomtown as well. And just to let you know how close it is, that is the Torchwood building right there. That's where Jack pops up from the bottom there. That's really cool. So yeah, I just thought I'd give a nice little intro as I'm in Cardiff already. So enjoy the rest of the video when I talk about my opinions on Time Heist. So yeah, I hope you appreciate that small little video I made when I was in Cardiff. I was visiting there. At the time of that recording, I was going to see Eternals. So that should give you an example of how much in advance I make these videos. Because by the time you watch this, Eternals would have been at least a year old by now. So, yeah, that's kind of mental. But yeah, so I had a nice day in Cardiff. I got to saw the towers and things, which is from Time Heist. So it's really surreal watching an episode after you've just been to the location. They're not in Cardiff wrong in the episode. The bits that they shot it on the outside of that pier with the pillars. When they're looking out into the bank. And speaking of banks, this is a Doctor Who does a bank heist story. Now, bank heists is a genre of fiction, most noticeably in movies. Some of the most noticeable bank heist movies are movies like Ocean 11 and a lot of like film noir films from the 1930s and 40s. So it's quite of a big range of films, and even after this, it's a genre that a lot of filmmakers, a lot of directors kind of pay homage to, most noticeably the first Ant-Man movie, which came out actually it came out a few years after this episode. So this episode was really set in its time of bringing a sci-fi element to the Time Heist. With this, of course, with the title suggesting, is a time heist revolving around a sci-fi plot with Doctor Who, of course. And this one, going into this, was kind of a nervous wreck to go into. Despite the episode looking absolutely gorgeous from the Next Time trailer, it's written by, like I stated, Stephen Moffat and Steve Thompson, and they haven't had a great track record in recent memory. I mean, Stephen Moffat has been picking up the steam with stories like Deep Breath and Day of the Doctor, but he's also had like Listen. He's also had a few not so good ones, especially in the later half of the Matt Smith era, and would continue on in the Capaldi era. And Steve Thompson, of course, had written Curse of the Black Spot, which is a really weak episode from Series 6, and Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, which is one of the weakest episodes of Series 7. So, like, how did they get Steve Thompson back? Why did they bring Steve Thompson back? It seems like such a really surreal and strange creative decision. This episode was actually written prior to Peter Capaldi's casting, and according to some behind-the-scenes info, basically all Steve Thompson did to define it, sorry, I don't know what that was, to define this episode to the 12th Doctor is basically make the Doctor more grumpy and less charismatic, less bombasticful in a sense. So that's some really cool information right there. And you've also got like the production team of The Teller, the alien or the monster of the week, the Teller, this strange creature. We talk about him when we get into the episodes. But yeah, so I remember when this episode was airing, and I remember being really concerned by the writers, but also being really excited with the premise and the ideas. And I feel like these kind of stories always, these tribute to tribute to heist movies always seem to give out a nice flavour of adventures. You know, you have those quirks when you have a team of people who have different skills. They learn how this bank has a very unique and a very strong structure of security, and you see them cleverly, in creative ways, trying to denounce the security. So you got these fun little ideas here. So yeah, with that out of the way, also as well, this episode, when it came out, when it aired, it was kind of like people enjoyed it, but it wasn't as memorable as other episodes in terms of the general consensus. It's an episode which a lot of people watched and they enjoyed, but they didn't really talk about afterwards, which is a shame, because I feel like every episode, even regardless of quality, deserves to be talked about, at least. Come on. Doctor Who is one of the groundbreaking in opening up ideas for creativity. Doctor Who, man. But yeah, so getting into the episode, we start off on this really weak scene, if I must be honest. Again, it ties into the whole Series 8 plot line of Clara and Danny, and basically we learn that Clara is going on a second date with Danny, and she's getting ready only for the Doctor to have turned up and is trying to convince her to go on another adventure with him. But Clara, of course, is busy buzzing. She's got getting her clothes ready. I will say, I do absolutely love how the Doctor, Peter Capaldi's Doctor, very reminiscent in a way of the Fourth Doctor and the First Doctor, where he just honestly does not see what Clara's doing. Like, Clara's just like, look, like she's got her hair all fancy, she's wearing like a nice suit, getting ready to go out on the town with Danny, and the Doctor's just like, yeah, I'm looking. You asked, you told me to look, and I'm looking. I don't get it. I also like, it's like when he also mentions about high heels, and the Doctor is just like, why do you need to wear high heels? Are you going to? They must be useful to get up to like high shelves. When Clara's like, right, I'm going to be late. The Doctor says something along the lines of, late to get into a cabinet, to get into a shelf. It's a really quick line. It's really like but I really love that dynamic here. Luckily, one of the things I really didn't like about Series 8 is the relationship between Clara and Danny. Not necessarily the characters on their own, but when they're together, Clara becomes really unlikable. And luckily, we only get one scene of them in here. And that's about it. It's really just the setup of the story. So you can not blank it out, but you can integrate it into the main narrative, where the Doctor suddenly gets a phone call from the TARDIS. It's also here as well that it is mentioned, it is re-established that one of the mysteries of the series, one of the mystery boxes that Stephen Moffat is setting up, is this mysterious woman who gave Clara his phone number, something which was of course established in The Bells of St. John and was re-established in Deep Breath, and now it's re-established here to remind the audience members that there's this mystery hanging out there. But it's just a line, so you can kind of distract it. And the Doctor then picks up the phone only to find that him and Clara have transported into a locked, secure room with two other individuals, all holding memory worms from the snowmen, and that brings some continuity into the series. In fact, this story is most noticeable for its continuity with the memory worms and a scene later on revolving around our two characters. And essentially, we learn that we have these 4 characters, the Doctor and Clara, of course, and these 2 new characters, Cy, played by Jonathan Bailey, and Silbra, played by Pippa Bennett Warner, and they basically have these unique abilities. Cy is he's a cyborg. He's a human, but he's got cybernetic enhancements. He's a hacker. He's like a hacker, and he can erase his memories, and he can alter memories whether he chooses to. Whereas Silver, she's a mutant, very similar to the X-Men, and her ability is that when she touches people's DNA, people's cells, she can actually replicate them and appear like them. A great example is a scene where she touches Clara's hand and she actually makes herself appear as Clara, as Jenna Louise Coleman. And they get this video from, well, first they hear their voices on a recording system, basically agreeing that they are willing participants for this particular event, this particular moment where they've agreed to have their memories wiped. And there's this mysterious figure who our character is called the architect. He bribed the architect first, and essentially he gives them all a mission. There is one of the biggest, most secure banks in history, in galaxy history. I can't pronounce it. The Beetlebrax. The Beetlebrax Collective Bank. I butchered that name, I do apologise. And essentially, it's the biggest bank in the galaxy, and anybody, if you're gonna fund an intergalactic war, if you have bought like a giant planet and you're getting benefits or the taxing and stuff, you'd store your money here. It's basically where the richest people save their belongings, and they've basically set up on a mission to go into there, and try and break into the bank, with them having a DNA extraction of a character who Silbra can touch, and she can transform into this person and then use his identity to get into the bank. And right off the bat, one thing that you will notice in this episode, Douglas McEdam directing here is just gorgeous. He's one of the few veterans in Series 8. But this story is really striking, and despite later on in the episode there's a lot of reused sets in terms of the episode. There's a lot of just white corridors, this particular corridor that gets repeated throughout the story, but the story has a really striking visual lighting palette. There's a lot of different bashing colours. You get some reds, you get your purples, you get your greens, you get your half blues in like a liquidy blue. There's just, in terms of visual, it's a sight to behold, with lots of great visual moments. Some really great CGI work in terms of the world building, especially when we get to see the bank from the outside, and especially when you see the bank on the inside and you can use the CGI to show how large the bank is. And we see all of these strange characters, with the production design giving these characters a really strange, almost 80s aesthetic. It's not that important to note, but I do remember when there were set photos of this story, and you see all of these strange characters, and they were all filming in Cardiff. There was a massive rumour that this was going to be a Captain Jack origin story, which of course didn't happen, but that would have been cool to see. And some of the great as well. I also like the use of slow motion, which is also a cliche, shall we say, in these heist movies, especially when you have our characters, usually in the films anyway, in what it's trying to rip off. You will always have these scenes where our characters basically dress the part, so they get in their suits, They all look all nice and tidy, ready to infiltrate, and they walk in slow motion. And here we do have a slow motion scene, and it is kind of badass as one of our characters is in a suit. Silva in her disguise, and all of our characters are in their like usual clothing. But the slow motion is actually really strange because sometimes it's shot in 60 frames, slowed down to 30, giving it a smooth. In certain elements as well, it is actually shot in 30 frames and slowed down with this jutted frame rate later on in the episode. And the fact that it uses different kinds of slow-mo, and it always is important, it's always relevant to the story it's telling. Just shows that McEdam really knows what he's doing, and the editing and the directing really know what they're talking about in this adventure. And that slow motion, we see him coming through the door, and the camera also pans to the side a bit. Just some really great visual moments. And essentially the alarms go off, and we get to see the main threat. Essentially, we see that these basically there's this woman. She kind of like owns the bank. She's not really, but she works for the higher up. She's personally connected to the person who runs the bank. We'll get into that later, it's a bit silly. And we get this really powerful scene in which we basically get introduced to the Teller, a creature that is basically the ultimate in CCTV, not technology, it's a creature. It's basically a futuristic sniffer dog, which actually can sense guilt. And basically the idea is that it can feel people's guilt, it can feel people trying to break into the banks, and when it does, it will then hunt them down and then dispose of them in a particular way. But now, before that, I will say that the concept it's kind of iffy, because you've got one criticism, which is not really that much. It's more of me overthinking it. But people rob banks and don't feel guilty about it. You might have an actual moral justified reason to rob banks. So what if the teller was reading the mind of somebody who was robbing the bank, but maybe doing a Robin Hood where he's stealing the rich and giving to the poor? He's not going to have any remorse for that. Or maybe they genuinely do, just don't have any guilt on stealing from people. Like, what does from the teller creature's point of view, what does it deal with? But also as well, this leads into the story narrative, and we get a few scenes where the teller is basically stalking our main heroes, and basically we get into the Moffatisms of the story. For those of you who don't know, Moffatisms is like Stephen Moffat's like quirks. One of the things he does a lot in his stories is don't do this and don't do that. Don't blink, don't breathe, from deep breath and blink respectively. And now it's don't think, as the teller can tell people thinking. So the doctor, to try and get the teller off their scent, essentially, tells our characters to try and blank out any sort of thoughts, which I don't blame anybody, but I feel like it was maybe a Moffatism too many. For one, it clearly is a rip-off. It's clearly the same idea, don't blink, don't breathe, count the shadows kind of thing, to those stories that Stephen Moffat has also previously written. So clearly that influence is there. And so that kind of is on itself. But however, I will put that to the side, because the way this creature is shot and the design, the prosthetics design, the animatronics of the eyes as well, just looks so cool. And again, you got this, as I mentioned, slow motion in the stories used very effectively. We have the start with our main characters coming in. You got that kind of heist kind of music start playing. Then when the teller gets introduced, we have a slow motion, but it's just threatening, and we hear it stomp. We hear its footsteps from a distance before we get a good look at it, and it's kind of chained up. And we only get really a good look at its head through the majority of the story, and it is just really a sight to behold. Later on in the episode, as I stated as well, there's also some sort of choppy slow motion effect, and that is when Clara basically has to not think, and you can kind of use this visual metaphor from this choppy slow motion that it's kind of trying to read thoughts. It's telepathically gone into this, not mindset, but like a viewpoint of seeing things telepathically. So just the design, the look of the story, from the production, from the directing, casting, brilliant. Let's talk about our two other side characters, because this is something that a lot of people kind of criticize with this story, and though I do agree to an extent, this story actually does, I think, a really good job at our team. Of course, you've got the Doctor and Clara, which they have this really great dynamic, especially how the Doctor in this story is really cold. There's some scenes where we believe that people have died, and the Doctor is basically like, right, we'll mourn later, but for now you need me, and we need to focus now. Don't care about like who's just died just now. We need to just get on with the mission, because this is probably one of the most important missions. Because we agreed to it, we must have known that this was important, some way, shape, or form. Even to the point that our lives might be at the stake. So it must be really important. And Clara is kind of the one that not only tries to calm them down, to try and bring them down to earth, but also tries to get other characters to understand his viewpoint, trying to like make up for his shortcomings as a person, which then leads us into our two other main characters, Sai and Silbra. Now, I really wish that there was more screen time with them and we got more to see. This story would have been so much better. I agree with everybody. This story would have been absolutely amazing if it was a two-parter and we fleshed out these characters more. Because though I do, like I said, I do really like these characters, and I think a lot of people do really like these characters, there is substance there. You still, mainly from the actors, Jonathan Bailey and Pepper Bennett Warner do a fantastic job at bringing out from Silbra's shyness and her uncomfortableness and timidness of the character who has basically lived her life unable to touch someone without transforming into them, and basically having really, and you can clearly tell from her performance and from this relationship and from how the character is written, that this has really affected her to some degree. As well as we got this side character who, he's kind of the only one there that's used to a heist. He kind of knows what he's doing, and so he's really confident in a sense, in a way. And he also, because he kind of more knows what he's doing, he doesn't really like the Doctor that much, and he bashes heads with him the most. While Silbra, she does kind of bash her heads with the Doctor as well, but she kind of meets him on his same level. There's a scene which they discover another thing the architect has left for them. These devices which have and the Doctor says he doesn't know what they are, but Silbra brings up like he's lying, but then kind of keeps it to herself until the Doctor and Silbra are by themselves, and she kind of like talks to her. It's like, as you know, I know everything about faces. I'm really good with faces because of my ability, and I know that you're lying. And the Doctor basically explains that they're essentially suicide pills, and that leads, of course, into a terrible scene in which the Teller gets Silbra. I completely forgot about the first Teller scene and what happened to that individual. I'll come back to Silbra later. That scene where the Teller basically gets its first victim in the story is one of those you poop your pants scenes. The effect is just absolutely. I remember, I think everybody had the same reaction where you just had your mouth drop. It's like you would expect that on a supposedly a family-friendly show, where you see this guy, he's basically in pain, and the Doctor basically explains that he's already dead. His tears aren't really tears, they're like just soup. They're just liquid now, not really extracting any emotion. And then after the thing's all done, the guy puts his hands down, he kind of falls backwards, and you see his head completely caved in. It's absolutely terrifying, and it's really disturbing work. The visual effects, fantastic, and really gives a real presence to the Teller as a Doctor Who monster. But back to Silbra. So she, like I said, she's a very timid character, and you see that a lot. And Bauke, like I said, leads into the scene in which she has this device, and the Doctor doesn't even know if he can save her. So she activates this device to basically die on her own terms, essentially, so her head doesn't cave in and go through this really horrible process of having your entire head completely caved in. And the Doctor is just like, right, okay, that's it. We need to get onto our mission. We need to continue on. We need to get into thing. And Sai is just like, what? You don't care about our comrade, shall we say, just dying in front of your eyes? To which the Doctor's just like, we can mourn about her later. She's dead, but we're alive. Think on that, concentrate on that, as we need to get to the main bank, try and get to basically what this mission is for. We don't know what it is, it could be really important. The Doctor knows it, of course. With his moral compass, he wouldn't agree to something if it was something so horrible. So he must have agreed to it for a noble reason at least. And so him and Sai have this disagreement. What I really love is when the Doctor walks off. He's kind of confident in himself. I love it. You kind of get a close up of Capaldi. He doesn't really smirk. He doesn't really smile to himself as if like, oh yeah, he's won. Kind of basically implying that the Doctor was kind of uncomfortable with his conversation. But Clara goes up to Sai and it's just like, believe me, I know he's absolutely horrible. I know what he just said was just out of character, out of not really like a human being would say. But believe me, he does care at heart. He does genuinely care. To which Sai is like, you've been with him a long time. I know, because you're very good at making excuses for him. I don't know if it was Stephen Moffat or Steve Thompson that wrote that line, but that line with the delivery by the Sai and the context, fine wine. Why is this story so forgotten? It's so well realized. And like I said, by this point in the story, most of the scenes are set in the same set. This kind of this large corridor, but because of the different lighting and the different way they're shot, mainly in like the red lighted corridor, there's a lot of close-ups of Clara and Nutella. When we get to the green, purplish lighting, there's a lot of mid shots. When we get to the purple, thick purple, there's a lot of long shots, and it gives each corridor a particular feel, despite the fact that they're all filmed on the same set. It's something which you don't really realise on the first viewing, but when you pick it up after multiple viewings, you do kind of like, oh yeah, it's the exact same set. That's really well directed. Like again, I can't praise Mackinton's directing in here enough. It is gorgeous. Just 10 out of 10 in terms of directing. But after Sai also goes up to the Teller, there's also a great moment where basically Sai explains to Clara as well that his cybernetics, because of something that happened in his past, to keep everybody he ever loved safe, including his family and his friends and his loved ones, he deleted them out of his memory. And so he has no idea of what his life was like. Of course he knows he had family, he had friends, but he has no memory of them. And Clara can kind of has this bonds his friendship over him, and she kind of doesn't judge him, but tries to understand this horrible situation that he's kind of put himself in, and he's kind of content with that because he knows that he must have done it for a right reason. He trusts himself that he trusts himself enough that he would do that on a noble cause, that he would leave his friends and family to keep them safe, despite now not knowing who the hell they are. There's a great moment where he knows he's about to die, and he tells Clara, they say that before you die, you have memories, you have flashbacks of all your friends and loved ones, all the people you've ever met. And I am having no flashbacks. Basically implying that he, in his dying moments, he doesn't remember anyone. That is just so messed up. But the story doesn't treat it like it's a tragedy. It's just like, it's so well realised. It's so strangely well realised. This again all culminates in the Doctor breaking into the bank at a particular moment of a storm, basically revealing that the Doctor knows that this architect character is from the future, and they're breaking the bank in the past, where they know this particular storm will arrive, so that when they do break into the bank, when they do get into the final location, shall we say, it'll be at the perfect time of the storm and they can get in. And we basically learn that there's these prizes for Sai and Cybra with a genetic dampener, shall we say, so that Saya can touch people without transforming into them. And Sai gets this piece of technology which, when used, can basically bring back any information that's on a hard drive, on a technical device, brings back every memory of it. So it will allow Sai to bring back his memories if he survived the experience. That was his prize, which is just so touching. And the Doctor and Clara quickly get kidnapped and captured by the Teller, and we basically learn as well throughout the story that the main woman who runs the bank appears to be exactly the same as the woman that they met earlier, the one who seemingly controls the Teller earlier on in the episode. And we essentially learn that this woman, she kind of hates her employers, as they all look like her. They're all clones of her, and so whenever one of them fails, she has them all executed, and they don't seem to mind. At least they do mind, I say, but they treat it as if like they've just been fired. They don't put up a fight, shall we say. And the actress who plays her does a really good job at giving these two characters, who we don't see a very lot of throughout the episode, but the actress does a good job at giving these characters, like, one's more flexible, one's a bit more upbeat, a little bit more flamboyant, whilst the other one is a bit more office, a bit more business, a bit more like comes up in high heels and a darter and stuff, and is awfully polite and stuff. And she does great, like I said, does a great job, the actress does. But the twist is it doesn't really impact the story at all. It's treated as this, like, oh my god, this really strange, impactful moment. Like, who cares? Why does it matter if all the people were clones? We only meet one, by the way, as well. So it's not a big deal. It's ridiculous. It's one of the weaker elements of the story. And the Doctor also, as well, he kind of works out who the architect is, who I won't spoil. You'll have to watch the episode itself. And the episode essentially ends with our characters. They basically, because of the storm, the bank is destroyed, but is about to be destroyed, leaving the Doctor and Clara and everyone else around them in the part of the bank, the private vaults, where something which the Doctor and Clara have come for, which we kind of learn that the teller has a mate, and the reason why these women were able to basically get the teller to use its abilities for the bank is because it kept its female counterpart stored away, and so it did these things in kind of to protect its loved one, to protect its mate. And so the Doctor's mission is to go and free the teller, and that is such a great, sweet, lovely twist to the ending. It's a very something that you wouldn't expect. And I know what a lot of people are thinking. I presume when I know what you're thinking. Edam, a very similar plot twist happened at the end of Heist, and it also you criticised that for that twist, and you didn't bother. You don't mind it here, but you mind it there, despite them both being the very similar twist of the main bad guy not turning out to be actually a bad guy, but is actually trying to look for its mate, and it happens very at the end of the story, which is something you criticise Hyde for. And I do see where you're coming from, and if that is your issue with this story, I totally agree to an extent. But however, what I think the story does better than Hyde is that with Hyde, you had this really authentic gothic story. There was a twist in that story where it turns out it's not really ghosts, it's mostly like a sci-fi, and then you have another twist on top of that which denotes the impact of the rest of the story. Here, though we do have that twist of the clones, it doesn't really change anything. So the main twist is the teller's not being a bad guy, but actually caring for its mate, and that is actually something which the story kind of not glues together, but it doesn't completely ruin any previous scenes. And so I personally really enjoy this ending. And that's Time Heist. Overall, in my opinion, it was the first great Peter Capaldi story. In my opinion, it's hugely underrated. If you haven't seen this story in a while, highly recommended. Though I do wish it was two-parters and we had more scenes with Sai and Sabra to experiment on their characters and see a lot more of. I feel like for the time being, for this one and done episode, I think it did a really good job. With only a handful of criticisms in the narrative, and everything else from the production, Murray Gould's music, and of course Douglas McIntyre's directing is at its peak, despite the fact that there's clearly only a limited set. The story does a great job of bringing out this massive scope to the episode. So yeah, hugely props. It's one of my favourite Capaldi stories, and it is a shame that it's so underrated. It's mostly looked over. So yeah, if I could change your mind on something, it's please rewatch this story again. It's worth remembering. At the very least, it's Doctor Who does a heist film. How cool is that? So anyway, that's Time Heist. So join me next time when the Doctor gets a new job as Clara is torn between her life with the Doctor and her life with Danny Pink. So join me next time for The Caretaker. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!